How do I make sure that my students are accountable for having seen the content and understood it and taken notes prior to coming into class? Well, why do we care about accountability in the first place? It's not just a justice sort of thing. When we're in a typical classroom environment, if a student comes in and hasn't done preparatory work, perhaps read the book, it really doesn't hurt other people in the class. That student may not be able to engage in the content as well, maybe won't have as informative questions, or will raise his hand and ask a question that could have been easily addressed from the book. But that really just leads to the embarrassment of that person, perhaps, and maybe a little bit of lost instruction time. But in this context, if students come in and they haven't seen the content already, and they haven't engaged in it critically themselves, then when they're asked to do critical and creative thought questions based on that content, they're going to fall short. And their group members are going to suffer because of their lack of preparation. It's very important socially then that they've already done that work, and we scaffold their accountability by putting procedures into place in the classroom environment. Two of the procedures that I've used in different size classes as viable are in a small class, I can go around to each student and set an expectation in advance, explaining it, as always. Please take notes on the on the video that you've watched. Bring them in, and then I will look at those notes every day, and perhaps I can see content in them. If it's a very small class, I can say, oh, that was a good thing to take notes on, or if not, I can move them in that direction. But regardless, I say, good, you have 2 pages of notes. It's clear to me that you watched the video to some extent. And I check that off in whatever thing. That could go for points, that could be a participation grade, whatever the case may be. Or, in a very much larger classroom, I don't have time to go around and do that, and I and a TA don't have time to do that. It would detract from instruction time. Even if I were going around to each of the groups during their activities to try to look at their notes, as I do in the small classroom environment, I wouldn't be able to necessarily hit each student in the classroom this way. So, instead, in that classroom environment, there are 2 different options. One is I can use a student response system to, the clickers as they're conventionally called, to ask questions on a PowerPoint in advance of the class. That's just a test of comprehension of the content from the video particularly. I ask the students questions that I've written from video content, examples that I used perhaps, or the specific way that I put together content, to help ensure that they have some stake in having watched the videos in advance. If they participate in this and they perform well, they get their points for it. If not, they appreciate that they should be critically engaged in that content more, or they need to watch the video prior to coming to class. If we don't use clickers or student response systems in the classroom, it's as easy as handing out a brief paper quiz prior to coming into class, or even putting one online prior to coming into class in whatever student system we have, Blackboard or Moodle or so on, so that students can go in, have watched the video, and then they can take a brief quiz. That way we don't use any time in the classroom to address this question of accountability.